Hello, it's Mikhail here, and this is going to be the start of a new series where I analyze, review, and just generally talk about specific mobile suits. And what better place to start off than the Kampfer? It's one of the suits I used from some of my very earliest matches, and it made me the pilot I am today. So I don't think there's any suit I'm more qualified to talk about. Anyway, the Kampfer is originally from Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket, and there it made a mark on fans with its massive armory, high mobility, and the fact that its armor was basically made of paper. And for those of you wondering if it's like that in the game, yes, yes, and yes. And, of course, you might expect it to be a raid, but it's actually a general class suit, which is a little bit weird, but frankly, makes for a nice, unique general that is very fun to use and can really ruin the day of any enemy raids. It first shows up at 450 points, but it goes all the way to 600 points, and it's both a ground and space suit without a specialization for either. First, let's start with the stats. Here we're just looking at the level 1 Kampfer, no modifications. And so this is the 450 version. Its health is pretty unimpressive at 12,000, only 6 range defenses, but it does have 21 melee defense, so it's actually a bit resilient against Bazooka tactics. But the real selling point here is the damage boosts. A base 30 range boost and melee boost, which for this cost is really quite impressive for a generalist like this. You don't normally get too much higher than that unless the suit is really specialized in one to the complete detriment of the other. And then its mobility is also quite impressive without any real weaknesses. Its part slots also support these statistical trends with plenty of close range slots, a moderate number of mid-range slots, and still enough range slots for a range boost or two. It's not going to be easy to cram on a lot of armor, but it is very easy to make it faster and stronger. The Kampfer's skill set also makes it seem very similar to a raid. It does have the standard emergency evasion and melee combo controller, both level 1, that you would really expect from any general after about 200 points. But it's also got a few rare skills. Most notably, it has level 1 maneuver armor and level 2 force injector, which help with its aggressive playstyle. It's also got high performance balancer, which is another pretty standard skill for generals at this cost, but essential with all the close combat the Kampfer engages in. And then it gets a little bit of a mobility boost with quick boost level 3 and high spec ambac. Now on to the weapons. The Kampfer's primary weapon is its shotgun. It's the exact same one used by the Ifrit and Ifrit DS. At close range, it can deal a very devastating amount of damage, easily hitting several thousands, thanks to the Kampfer's impressive range boost. And just to make it a little bit sweeter, it deals bonus damage against parts, which means that if you shoot the enemy in the leg, their legs will take more localized damage than the hit point damage you dealt, making it very good at breaking legs and disabling a target. It's also just a very good stagger tool, since only 3 pellets need to hit to stagger anything that doesn't have damage control, and even damage control is not saving anyone. It deals so much stagger that damage control is not going to have much of an impact at all. And then, because this is accumulation stagger from all the individual pellets, it can stagger someone directly through their shield, and it bypasses maneuver armor and shock dampeners, which makes the Kampfer able to counter many suits that maybe other generals might struggle with. Probably the most glaring one being the GBO2, or also Nah, the guard custom and Duelahan don't really show up at the same cost. But if we ever get a level 2 Pale Rider Duelahan, it will need to watch out for the Kampfer. That said, the shotgun isn't all perfect. Its damage is a bit unreliable at range, and because it's accumulation stagger, you cannot use it beyond the first step of a chain stun. And finally, it has only 3 shells, and there's a bit of a delay between shots. So you have to be very careful with your shots, and wasted ammo is going to come back to bite you. The Kampfer's Beam Saber, while unimpressive, still gets the job done. It's got 2100 damage, and that's more than enough when you combine it with the ridiculous melee boost that the Kampfer possesses. And furthermore, with the Kampfer's massive repertoire of staggering weapons, there's going to be plenty of opportunities to use the Saber. One thing to note, though, is that the back melee, the knockdown swing, is a overhead slash and not, say, the wide, easy-to-use slash that many Federation suits with Beam Sabers get. But if you learn to handle this, that's the only real quirk of the Kampfer's melee. Now we're on to the Kampfer's secondary weapons, the first of which, and practically a secondary primary, is the double bazookas. The reason I say that they're practically a second primary is that they have ammo and damage comparable or superior to many similar primary weapons at this cost. The damage looks a little low, but the fact that you fire 2 shots means that if you hit with both, you will be hitting twice as hard. And not to mention, firing 2 shots makes it just a little bit easier to hit your mark. That's not all. They do have the longest effective range of the Kampfer's weapons, making them what you want to lead into most of the time. You'll often want to go into battle with the twin bazookas out, and then switch to using the shotgun as your primary once you've closed in. This is further supported by the fact that the bazookas are slow to equip, whereas the shotgun you can draw faster. So if you run out of bazooka and have to switch to the shotgun, it's not as bad as if you run out of shotgun and have to switch to the bazookas. And finally, the range makes them they're really the only plinking option the Kampfer has for if things are at a standoff and you're not able to get in close. Take some bazooka shots. You'll still deal some pretty good damage with them. Next up is the Kampfer's Sturmfaust, its most powerful weapon, dealing a total of 3,000 base damage if both shells hit. The Kampfer's Sturmfausts have one major advantage over normal single Sturmfausts. While the single Sturmfausts take 3 seconds to equip and thus have to be used tactically, the Kampfers equip in half a second, making them a very good quick draw option as an emergency weapon, as well as the Kampfer's main source of chain stagger. And it's quite a powerful chain stagger, too. That said, the Kampfer does pay for this with the fact that its Sturmfausts take twice as long to reload, taking 30 seconds instead of the usual 15 seconds. So you have to be a little smart about how you use them, and also you have to be careful not to waste them by missing a target. They're probably best saved for emergencies or instances where you know that you're going to hit with them. But if used properly, they're the most powerful weapon in the Kampfer's arsenal. Last, and definitely least, are the Kampfer's Head Vulcans. They are better than pretty much any other Head Vulcans for cost, though, even ones from Zeta Gundams, as they are the exact same model used by the Gilgert Jaeger. This means that they have an exceptional ammo capacity, and while the damage is lacking, it's still better than a lot of Head Vulcans. Factor in the Kampfer's range boost, and the fact that these can, of course, be shot while boosting, and you have a weapon that has some limited utility in the Kampfer's arsenal. Of course, the biggest reason that they're useful is that the Kampfer tends to burn through its other weapons quite quickly in sustained combat. So sometimes you will just need to use the Head Vulcans because it's either that or sit behind a rock and wait for your weapons to reload. And sometimes you just really need to kill someone and you don't have any bullets left except your Vulcans. Now, there is one more iconic weapon the Kampfer has, but it's not a real weapon. It's its counterattack. The Kampfer brings out the chain mine and wraps it around an enemy, dealing massive damage. It is one of the better counters in the game, and certainly one of the most satisfying, and it definitely makes the Kampfer something you don't want to fuck up your melee around. Now we're going to circle back to the Kampfer's part slots, specifically what you should put in them. Despite the Kampfer being a very hyper-specialized suit, it actually is pretty flexible in what you can do with its part slots. Personally, being a player whose very playstyle has been shaped by the Kampfer's complete disregard for survivability in favor of speed and power, I give it more firepower and more speed. That said, I do know one person who swears by a more durability-focused build, and I believe he even got the Kampfer's hit points up to over 20,000 at one of the higher levels. That said, this is really down to how you want to use it. If you're confident in your ability to stay alive by piloting skills alone, maybe lean towards the raw firepower. But if you maybe aren't as confident, or you just want to use it as a bit more of a frontline brawler, you can absolutely make it that. And of course, you can always mix the two, though results may vary. And then one last thing to keep in mind is that because the Kampfer has a lot of weapons with low ammo and long reload times, a quick loader part would definitely not be a bad idea. Unfortunately, the level 4 takes up a ton of mid-range slots, so most of the time you'll probably only really be considering the level 3 or a combination of the level 1 and 2, since the low-level ones don't really do enough on their own to be of much value. So, how do you actually use the Kampfer in battle? Well, you have to be smart about it. You can't just charge in from the front, because you have very frail armor, but you're a very big threat, so most more experienced players will know, put all your attention on the Kampfer, kill him first, and then go back to fighting your team. So if you try and just rush up from the front and expect to be able to engage an opponent one-on-one, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So you have to be smarter. You have to flank, you have to ambush, and generally a Kampfer should never fight fair. Unless the opponent is completely isolated, in which case it's already unfair because you're in a Kampfer. Really what you want to do is flank and ambush, use cover to get in close, and find an opportunity to cause some chaos with the enemy forces, take out their second line suits, just generally mess them up with a quick ambush, and then get out. You've probably dealt a lot of damage in this short period of time, and this has created an opening for the rest of your team to hopefully exploit. And sometimes just using the fact that the Kampfer draws a lot of fire can create openings for your team. But sometimes you have to assault from the front. If this is the case, it's best to pick a buddy to go with, back them up, let them draw the fire, meanwhile you provide stagger against anything that comes after them, and make them very hard to approach. The Kampfer, for being a suit that so often wants to lone wolf, is actually a very good team player. Just because of how much damage and stagger it can deal out, and how much it benefits from having teammates around to watch its back. One last note is that the Kampfer is a suit that really wants you to learn how to judge the enemy's combat range. A good Kampfer player can float just on the edge of where the enemy can successfully stagger into melee them, while simultaneously being able to close in, stagger, and then get a melee themselves. This helps just make it a little bit more difficult for the enemy to rack up a lot of damage, and keeps you alive that much longer, which is vital in the Kampfer. One of the most powerful offensive tools in the Kampfer's massive arsenal is Chain Stun. Now, this tactic I'm not always the biggest fan of, but the Kampfer does it right. Either the shotgun or the bazookas can be followed up with the twin Sturmfausts, netting a nice 3,000 extra damage. Well, 3,000 base damage is going to be more with the Kampfer's range boost, and also extending the window to follow up with the Kampfer's ever-dangerous melee attack. Despite this being so powerful, though, this is the only chain stun the Kampfer can do. The shotgun is accumulation stagger, which cannot be used for chain stun, at least not reliably. You can sort of fake it if you're dealing with a support, or something without emergency evasion. And the bazookas, once again, they take too long to equip, so they can only really fake it against targets that cannot reliably get out even after they fully recover. So even though it's powerful, the Kampfer's chain stun is only available once every 30 seconds. Speaking of bullying downed targets, one of the Kampfer's other big offensive techniques is what I tend to call the Kampfer shuffle. First, you knock down your target. Then you immediately switch to the shotgun and shoot them, preferably in the legs due to just how quickly this tactic can break the legs. Then you switch to the beam saber and do a forward melee. You don't have time for a combo. Maybe you can do a front side in space, but you don't have time for a back melee. But a front melee plus a shotgun shell is still going to deal a lot more damage than most of what you have with a saber alone. Not to mention that the shotgun absolutely can destroy a down target's legs. One detail worth noting is that the Kampfer shuffle is not exclusive to the Kampfer, despite me naming it after the Kampfer. It's perfectly viable with the Efreet too, due to using the same shotgun and very similar melee patterns. I'm not sure if the Efreet DS can do it due to the Heat Lance, but it can probably do something similar, so give it a try if you use the Efreets. And of course, though there is one variant, which is that you can use the Sturmfausts instead of the shotgun. This does give you a bit better damage, I believe, but of course it doesn't quite brutalize the legs as much. And it uses your valuable Sturmfausts, which most of the time are better saved for targeting someone for chain stun. Now, how does the Kampfer stack up against other types of suits? Well, it's a suit of extremes, and its matchups do mirror that. First off, it is one of the best raid killers in the game. Even compared to other generals at cost, this is probably the last thing an enemy raid wants to see coming their way. Then, for that matter, one of the best things the Kampfer can be doing is hunting down and exterminating enemy raids, and generally leaving your support much, much better off. The first reason for this is that the shotgun bypasses the maneuver armor that many raids rely on, and that plus the Kampfer's other weapon list means that it is 100% every bit as comfortable in close combat as any raid is. So you can't really raids cannot really take it out of its comfort zone by closing in and doing some fancy piloting in close range, because the Kampfer is probably doing that too. And finally, the Kampfer's one good defense is its melee defense, and most raids tend to be very lopsidedly in favor of melee damage. So, the one thing that the Kampfer doesn't die in about 2 seconds to is the one thing that most raids rely on. For much of the same reasons, it's also very effective against general class suits that rely on straightforward stagger to melee techniques, or Bazooka as it's commonly called. Because, well, unless they have something to fall back on, the Kampfer can pretty much just completely outdo them. Most notably, the Kampfer can use its maneuver armor to basically just get them to waste their stagger weapon. Most people won't realize that you have it, and will gladly waste their bazooka round trying to stagger you, only to fail and now you're free to close in on them without worrying about being stunned. You do take some damage in this, which is not great for the Kampfer, but typically Bazooka suits tend to not have the best range damage anyway, and the weapons used for stagger tend not to do the most damage anyway. So you can afford to take the hit if it's to close in and do your thing. And then once you have baited out the stagger option, you have a lot more stagger options than they do. And of course, because you have two different staggering primaries, if an enemy manages to dodge out of your melee combo, you can always switch to the other stagger weapon, stagger them again, and then melee them again. So yeah, the Kampfer's loadout is pretty much perfect for hunting Bazooka generals. Although this is the cost where few of them start to diversify, so watch out for the handful that have actually good secondary weapons, because those can still be a major threat to the Kampfer. Now for the bad matchups. Basically, anything capable of high range DPS is going to ruin the Kampfer's day. Generally, DPS-focused weapons deal more damage over a given amount of time than any sort of spike damage-focused weapons, and because they tend to use accumulation stagger, that means the Kampfer can't maneuver armor through them. So pretty much any general with a machine gun or other rapid-fire weapons is a very big threat to the Kampfer. And while the Kampfer can do alright against sniper and heavy artillery support suits, though those that are more aggressive and have a more sustained offense, like the Gilgoo J or the Mudrock, can really give the Kampfer a bad time. So yeah, beware of anything with good ranged damage. If it relies on melee, you're safe, but if it relies on just staying at a distance and shooting you to death, you are going to have a tougher time. And yes, this does mean that the Gundam Alex, fittingly enough, is a very bad matchup for the Kampfer. This goes double if it's using the beam rifle, because this means it just has two different high DPS weapons that can completely ruin your day. And yeah, anything else with a machine gun is just going to recreate the way that the Kampfer was destroyed in 0080, so really watch out for the few players that use machine guns, or the handful of suits with good secondary machine guns. Finally, let's talk about some other suits that are similar to the Kampfer. Maybe you like the Kampfer and you want something similar for other cost ranges. Or maybe the Kampfer just isn't right for you, but there is something you like there. You just need something a little bit different. In either case, there are a few other suits that stand out as being similar to the Kampfer. First and most obviously, there's the Ifrit, and to a lesser extent, its raid cousin, the Ifrit DS. These both use the same shotgun as the Kampfer, meaning they can do the Kampfer shuffle, and are tougher and possesses a smoke screen that helps them sneak in close. However, they do have much worse range boost, they're not as fast in high-speed movement, and they have a very limited weapon selection that makes them even worse at sustained combat than the Kampfer is. Another highly similar suit to the Kampfer is the Psychozaku. It's also a bit frail, though mostly just because it has poor hit points. Its range defenses are pretty good, although its melee defense is lacking. And it also has high speed and firepower. And it even has a similar weapon loadout to the Kampfer, with a stagger-inducing primary, and its secondary weapons include twin bazookas, a machine gun option, and twin Sturmfausts. And in fact, they even both have maneuver armor. However, while the Kampfer is a well-rounded, all-range kind of suit, though maybe a little weaker at long range, the Psychozaku is pretty much exclusively focused on range damage. It can do okay in melee, but it's got a base melee boost of 0 and unimpressive melee weapon, so really you just use the melee to extend combos and get knockdowns. Additionally, it's space only, so you probably won't be seeing it as much as the Kampfer. But with all that said, it does have a lot in common, and it has a lot of the same draws. A whole family of suits that is quite similar to the Kampfer is the Pale Rider line. These suits may not have as many weapon loadout commonalities as the Ifrit or Psychozaku do, but they have the same general feel and role as the Kampfer. Like the Kampfer, they're pretty much glass cannon suits, something that is amplified by their Hades mode, and they also do tend to have the wide and varied loadout that the Kampfer has, making them able to play quite similarly, focusing on big damage and disrupting the enemy team, and generally relying more on your piloting skills than anything else to keep you alive. So if you like the fundamental how the Kampfer feels over just the specifics of its weapon loadout, they're a good choice, and they all come in a bit lower cost than the Kampfer, so there's not as much competition there. You can use them as a low-cost alternative. Finally, we have another suit with very similar weapons, but a radically different playstyle. The Digi, or however the fuck you want to pronounce that. If you want to be like the Kampfer, but it just didn't click with you because of its poor survivability, the Digi might be a bit more what you like. Its weapon loadout has a few main commonalities. Mostly that they both have a shooting stagger weapon, the Digi's beam rifle and the Kampfer's bazookas, and they also both have a shotgun, and they also both have maneuver armor. But of course the Digi is far more durable. However, while the Digi excels in durability, it does not have the raw brute force that the Kampfer has. Its shotgun deals less than half the damage of the Kampfer's, and it does not have the versatility the Kampfer gets from its Sturmfausts. The Vulcans are also inferior, and while this has been mitigated with the recent buff that gave an extra shell to its shotgun, it generally has even worse ammo issues than the Kampfer does. So while the Digi doesn't offer much to die-hard Kampfer mains who live and breathe the Kampfer's high-risk, high-reward playstyle, it might just be what you want if you really are more of a line fighter and prioritize survivability, but you really like the Kampfer's weapon loadout. It's kind of the opposite of the Pale Riders in that respect. The Pale Riders have similar playstyle but radically different weapons, while the Digi has very similar weapons but a radically different playstyle. Of course, the Digi is at least also quite brutally effective at raids, so that is one thing it shares in common with the Kampfer. Anyway, moving on. So now we're pretty much at the end. The Kampfer is a very difficult suit to use, but its sheer offensive power means that it can be quite rewarding if you're able to use it right and not just feed the enemy team all the time. I personally got it quite early in the game. You know that limited time gotcha that they give to new players? One of the steps is guaranteed suits from a certain list. I sort of gave in and dropped a bit of money to do all of that, and I got the Kampfer out of it, specifically the level 2 one, and that suit pretty much shaped my playstyle. For a while, I had no idea what good armor looked like because I was so used to the Kampfer's shitty armor, and it made me very willing to take risks, but very able to survive just by sheer piloting ability, and yeah, so it really shaped me as a pilot. The Kampfer is the kind of suit that you will have a lot demanded of you to pilot it. But if you really get along with it, not only is it one of the most powerful suits for cost in the game, but it will make you a better pilot because you have to rely so much on your own abilities to stay alive. If you then go back to piloting other suits that have actual defenses, you'll find yourself a lot harder to kill just because you have trained yourself on one of the most fragile suits for cost in the game. It really isn't for everyone, but those who can make good use of it will find that it is quite reliable and it is quite satisfying how it just laughs at the Bazooka meta and completely trashes anyone who tries simple stagger melee tactics against it. And yes, it is rather funny that I go by Mikhail, and the first suit that I ever mained in this game is the Kampfer.